to corporation assure themselves of a return on their investments. Because when you get the companies, the people invest in organizations. Then by investing, they expect the fair return for their investments. And they are the suppliers of finance, and they want to assure that for their investments, whether they receive a fair and the reasonable the returns. And that is the governance assures, or the governance deal with the ways in which the suppliers to corporate assures themselves of a return on their investments. Therefore, corporate governance widely understood as a systems. It's a systems how governance system is happening by which corporate the which corporation business are directed and controlled. How we are directed the business, how we are controlled the business. That is the corporate governance. That is the direction and the control of the organizations. The principles of corporate governance basically is not a new concept, and this is one that OECD endorsed by OECD ministers in 1999 and subsequently revised in April 2004 and have become international benchmark, not the local, international benchmark for policymakers, investors, corporations, and stakeholders, the worldwide. This is the worldwide benchmark. And in Sri Lanka also, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, they have issued the best corporate governance practices the companies need to adhere. And that is also there. And internationally also, it is the best the practices, best international practices, the government organization should follow. In determining the corporate governance, there are selected determinants and participants in the corporate governance, and the managers are there. Managers are the people who run the organizations. Then they have the responsibility to manage the funds of the stakeholders in a proper manner through which the shareholders' expectation need to be discharged. And then the managers, the systems in the world, in organization managers are there in the center, and the board of directors, in auditors, customers, and the suppliers, unions, media, analysts, the information analysts, creditors, investors, those are the different parties. Some of the parties involved in the organization activities. And all of these parties have different interests, different expectations, and through the company operation, those expectations has to be fulfilled. And in fulfilling those the expectations or the interest of different stakeholders, and the systems, the organized companies are influenced by different laws and regulations and the standards. And the regulatory the enforcements are there. And then that also influence in determining this the companies, regulatory info, the and then accounting standards are there. The IFRS, International Financial the regulation, IFRS regulations, standards, and again in doing the efficient capital markets, and the rules and regulations are there, and the legals, laws and traditions, and the societal and cultural values. All those forces influence in doing the affairs of the organization, and be subject to that, the organization activities has to be directed and controlled. Then in discussing the corporate governance, there are different the theories are there. Some of the theories applicable to corporate governance only. Some these theories applicable to varieties of situations. I think as a master's students, you have to master these theories, and those are the theory. Those theories are the base roots of the different subject disciplines. And without knowing the base, the roots of different phenomena, and at the master's level, then it is not it is not good to the have the lack knowledge in these areas, because you have to master this one. I think, as I mentioned, the online, this is limited resources. Then you have to read the book and not the chat AI, and they read the book and get this thing and get the expand your knowledge in these areas. And then the theory, the one that the different theories use. One is that the agency theory. Now, agency theory, which explain the role of board of directors in terms of the managerial controls and monitoring. And this focus of the agency theory is that principal agency theory identify agency relationship, where one party, the principals, delegate works, the other party, and the agents, and there is relationships. Because of that, relationship is called the agency relationships, and both parties have the diverse expectations and diverse interest. In order to reconcile, so harmonize these situations, the governance practices are required. And another approach to explain uh, the corporate governance is the resource-based approach. That is basically in terms of the role of boards, co-optations of resources, and the focus here. This theory provide a theoretical foundation for directors' resources role, including access to resources and advice needed by the firm to enhance organizational functionings, firm performance, and the survival. Then transaction cost theory, I think you all are familiar. Those that cost theory can be used, and this is the in terms of the role of boards. This is the governance with the contractual relationships, and there is a contract, and then this views the firm itself as a governance structure. This choice of an appropriate organization structure can help align interest of directors and the stakeholders. Then another approach, we can do the stakeholder approach, which explain the consensus of all directors, shareholders, and focus here is that this is an emphasis of stakeholders, then the governance structure of the company that may provide some directions, representation to the groups. That theory also can be used in explaining the corporate governance, why it is required, what is the importance of corporate governance in organizations in directing and controlling their activities. And also widely used theory is the stewardship theory. The stewardship theory, that is the management empower, the role, empowerments. Then this is the focus of this theory is with regard to the corporate governance, and directors are regarded as the stewards of the company's assets and will be predisposed to act in the best interest of the shareholders, and that is the focus. And also in explaining, in describing the corporate governance, The class hegemony theory can be used. It is a perpetuation elite and class power. The focus and the role and the focus is the directors are considered as an elite groups at the top of the company and will recruit, promote new director, taking into account how well new appointments might fit into that elite groups. That is we call the class hegemony. That hegemony theory also can be used in explaining the corporate governance of the organizations. Then also we can use the managerial hegemony. The managerial hegemony is the hegemony of the managers. Now earlier one is hegemony of the classes. This is hegemony of the managers. And the role here, the word as a legal fractions. Now focus of the hegemony, managerial hegemony, management of a company within its knowledge of the day-to-day operation may effectively dominates the directors and hence weaken the influence of the directors. Also, we can use and um, principal agency theory, principal agency theory, and the principal agency theory, that is managerial controls and monitoring. Now, this focuses on principal conflicts between the principals and principal, the shareholders, between the controlling shareholders and minority and the controlling shareholders. The minority shareholders results from concentrated ownerships and extensive family ownerships and controls, business group structure, weak legal protection for the minority shareholder. This also can be used in explaining the corporate governance, particularly from the point of principles, from the point of principal conflicts and shareholders conflicts. And this theory also can be used in explaining the corporate governance. Now, there are many theories, and all theories has been developed to see the how organization directed and controls, how the company maintain proper check and balances. That is the core of those theories. And as mentioned, the corporate governance is the relationship among stakeholders that is used to determine the controls, the strategic direction, and the performance of the organizations. This is concerned with the identifying ways to ensure strategic decisions are made more effectively. Strategic decisions are made more effectively, and then using corporations to establish order between firms owners and top level managers whose interests may be in conflicts. Then this is how the agency approach will happens. And shareholders are the principal. They are the owners of the company, and they hire the managers to run the organizations, and they are the decision makers of the organization and the agents. Then there is relationships create between the owners and the managers, and that is an agency relationships. That is the risk bearing specialist principles and the paying compensation managers and the decision making. To create agency relationships through which this will be managed, and in return the managers are paid remunerations. That is how the relationship will happen. Now, this agency relationships, when happen, there are some issues, problems. In order to address those issues, the governance practices are required in the organization. That is the core of the agency theory in terms of the governance and the issues, problems with regard to the managers and agents should be reconciled or solved using a mechanisms. That mechanism is called the corporate governance mechanisms. Now here they have these problems with the two parties. Principal agents have divergent interests and the goals. This means that principals need the proper return, fair return for their investments, and the agents, principals, agents require proper compensation because of there is a conflict between two parties. One party require the returns, other party require the conflict. So sorry, compensation. That is because of divergent the interest, and to the address the issue, the governance mechanism should be required. And then shareholders lack direct control of large public traded corporations. Shareholders cannot the control because they are investing the money. Management is done by the managers of the organization, so that direct control cannot be done. And therefore, there should be a separate party other than the managers to control the affairs of the organizations. And then agent make decision that results in the pursuit of goals that conflict with those of principals, and the principals goals and the agents goals may be different. Therefore there may be a conflicts, and in order to as mentioned, to address those conflicts, those conflict, different mechanism is required, and that mechanism should be the should be uh, done through the corporate governance mechanism. That's why the governance mechanism. Again, this highlight the importance of the mechanisms of governance. Then it is difficult or expensive for principal to verify that the agent has behaved properly, and the shareholders cannot see whether the managers are behaving in a proper manner in conducting their business activities. And as a result, again, they need a separate mechanism to foresee the behavior of the managers, and that is coming through the corporate governance. An agent fall free to managerial opportunisms, and they have the managers have the opportunistic behavior because they need the salaries, and to enhance their compensations and the benefits, they do some of the things which not be the interest of the shareholders, and then there are some conflict will be happens. That's why the governance mechanism is required. And here basically the managers have some opportunistic behavior. Now this opportunistic behavior includes they seek they are the seeking self-interest with guile cunning. They have the self-interest. They do some activities for their benefits, not for the benefit of the organizations. That is for their managers opportunism and attitudes. It is an attitudes of the managers, and it is a set of behaviors specific to self-interest. Then as a result of that, management opportunism comes, and this opportunism prevents the maximization of the shareholders' wealth, because that managers have opportunistic behavior. As a result of that, the expectations of the shareholders cannot be uh, the fulfills, and that's why this opportunism prevents the maximization of shareholders' wealth. In order to response, the managerial opportunism. That's why the in agency theory says that the conflicts between two parties and the theories there should be a mechanisms. The government mechanism should be there. And in response to this managerial opportunisms, response to this one opportunisms, and the principal because principal don't know how beforehand which agent will or will not act opportunistically. The, the investors doesn't know, principal doesn't know. Then the mechanism should be there. Thus, principal establish governance and control mechanism provide managerial operation. Then we don't know principals as an investor. We don't know which agents or which managers will or will not active opportunistically. We don't know. Therefore, the principal establish governance and control mechanism prevent managerial opportunisms. That is we call the governance systems. And when it's come to again the agency cost and the governance mechanism, there are two things. Agency cost, the cost to follow the agency approach, and the agency benefits are there. Now, agency cost means a sum of incentives cost, monitoring cost, enforcement cost, and individual financial losses incurred by the principal, because governance mechanism cannot guarantee that total compliance by the agency. When running the governance systems, in the governance system, there is a cost. That's called the agency cost. This cost include incentives. We have the incentives to people who adhere. They apply for the governance, and they have to monitor the systems, and there is a cost, and reinforcement cost, and the individual financial losses. Then principal may engage in monitoring behavior to assess the activities and decision of the managers. Principals may they monitor behavior. However, dispersed shareholding makes it difficult and inefficient to monitor manager behavior. Dispersed organization, this is some difficulty in doing so. This is not the concentrated organizations ownerships and dispersed ownerships. This is some difficulties there. Then, therefore, the board of directors will be appointed. Board of directors have a duty to shareholders to monitor management. Management will be monitored by the board of directors. That is the duty, one of the duties of the board of directors. And however, board are often accused of being lax of performance dysfunction. Sometimes there are some issues with regard to the board of directors also in performing these functions. Then corporate governance mechanism. Therefore, we have different mechanisms will be used to make the governance. One is that internal governance mechanisms, internally what we do, and internally ownership concentrations, and the relative amount of stock owned by individual shareholders and the institutional investors. In the ownership will be not the very dispersed and concentrate through like the institutions, invest institution and some stakeholders. There are major shareholders. Therefore, they will look after. They are vigilant about the organization, the activities rather small. The shareholders, the small shareholders, they are not much concerned the way in which the organization is operating. What they need is that invest in the organization, quick return in the sense that share prices. But larger investors, they are going for the share price increases. They want to maintain the organization ownerships. Therefore, they are much concerned about how the organization is operating. Therefore, if there's larger investors in the organizations, large institutional investors or the individual investors, then they are much vigilant, much concerned about the organization activities, which will facilitate for the proper governance of the organizations. That is the one thing, ownership concentrations. And other option is the board of directors. The companies will appoint board of directors. Now, board of directors are the individual who are responsible for representing the firm owners by monitoring top-level managers' strategic decisions. That is the individual the responsibility for representing the firm ownerships. And then another the approach which can be used internally, executive compensations, and use salary, bonus, long-term incentive align with managers' interest and shareholder interest. Then if that good payment is there, then the managers work dedicatedly, committedly, and as a result of that, they will maintain proper responsibilities for the organization, the organization, and work towards the providing the expectation of fulfilling the expectation of the stakeholders. And top management, the governance, the top management, TMT responsibilities pertain to governance, and the one is the issues on the job consumptions. Now, the managers, top management, they get the high expensive work, and that is an issue with the top management. And they are pay hike, excessive pay or pay hike has not been linked to the performance, down market and upward spiral of executive pay and not linked, and they try to develop their own domain, which is called the empire building, by additional businesses that increase the size of the company without increasing the shareholders' weight. Sometimes they go for the expand in the organization by developing or the expanding the additional activities of the businesses, but those are not in line with the interests of the organization, the investors, that is the interest of the individual management, which may have some conflicts. Right? That is the empire building is there. And those are the issues. And the board expansion, board is the main mechanism in which the organization governance is operating, functioning, governance practice is functioning, and the boards are concerned, then the board have the function and the responsibilities. Board of directors function. There are some of the main functions, and one that the setting corporate strategy, that is our concern, the setting corporate strategy, overall direction, mission, and or visions. They are the people who much concerned about the organization with regard to the setting of corporate objectives, directions, big direction they have to concern, and the vision and the missions. Then hiring and firing CEO and top managements. The hiring, the top management and the CEOs. Then controlling, monitoring, and supervision of top managements. They have to control the activities, the these necessary activities, undirected activities, and controls, monitor and supervise, and reviewing and approving the use of resources. The large resources when used, they have to review and approve and caring for shareholder interest. They have to care the shareholders' interest. And now this is the role of board in the strategic management. Based on the degree of involvement, the board role is to carry out three basic tasks. One is the monitoring. They have to do the monitoring, monitor development inside and outside the corporations, what is happening, and be vigilant and monitor. That is one thing of the role of the corporate governance in doing the performing the strategic role. monitoring, evaluating and influence, evaluate, review proposals, and with regard to the activities submitted by the management, advise, provide suggestions, and provide alternatives. Then initiate and determine, delineate cooperation missions, and specify strategic options. And those are some of the main three activities of the boards in relation to the strategic management. And board directors have the power, power to direct the affairs of the organization. They have the power to direct the affairs of the organization. They have the power to punish and rewards managers. They have to punish the managers. They can reward the managers and protect owners from managerial opportunism. As I mentioned earlier, the managerial opportunities is there. Opportunisms that the responsibility power of the board of directors, one of the board of directors is to protect the owners from such the managerial opportunities of the managers. Mm. Then when with regard to the compositions of the boards, board composition normally concern related now two things: board independence. We have to maintain the independence of the boards and including independence of the board committees, and diversity has to be there, firm and industry experience, functional backgrounds of board members, board independence, diversity, the board members, and the CEO duality. Duality in the sense that we have to concern about whether chair of the company will the lead or the chair the board of directors. If the one person hold in both position, chairman of the company and the chairman of the board of directors, which is called the duality concepts, and then that is one way good, one way bad. Then proper governance practices that should be separated, and then anyway that the board composition need to be considered. When you get the board of directors, that include two type of members. Inside directors, we call the executive directors, or we call the inside directors or management directors are salaried employees such as CEO, president, and the chief financial officers. Those are called the executive directors. Other one is the outside directors. The outside directors we call the non-executive directors. Non-executive directors, they are related to affiliated outside the directors, outside directors who have pre-existing relationship with the firm, such as family relatives or retired executives. Independent outside directors are directors who have no personal the connections or business dealing with the firms. Outside non-executive directors mean they have no any business dealing and personal connections with the companies, the executive directors, internal people, and those are the two parties, the executive directors and the non-executive directors. Then there should be a clear divisions and responsibilities of the head of the company. The decision to combine, as mentioned earlier, post of chairman and the CEO in one person should be justified now in the board. In then, if the chairman of the company, the board of directors in public companies, and clearly they have to justify why these two boards are going to be combined. Rather having these two boards, why are going to give these two boards to the single person, one person that has to be justified properly in their financial statements as a notes in publicly listed companies. Board directors, member, there should be a balance between executive and the non-executive directors, the internal directors and the external director. There should be a balance. At least two non-executive directors or one-third of total number of directors, which is higher. And in doing, there should at least two executive directors, two non-executive directors, that is the outside directors at least, or one-third of total number of directors, which is higher. Now, for example, say if a company, there are in total, there are nine directors, at least one third, three directors should be from the outside, and not the two in that case. At least there should be a, for example, say if there's a five, then at least there should be a two. If there's a six, at least there should be a six. Likewise, two. Likewise, at least two, or otherwise one-third of the directors, which is higher. And where the constitution of board of directors include only two boards, such non-executive directors should be independent. Include only two boards, such executive directors should be independent. And if both chairman and the CEO is the same, the board should appoint senior independent non-executive director under such circumstances, uh, setting such circumstances, setting up lead director role among outside directors can effectively balance. If both are same, say chairman, and now the requirement is that at least two should be their executives, non-executives, then or one-third maximum. However, if chairman and the CEO is the same in the board, the company chairman lead the company board of directors, and non-executive directors comprise the majority. That is, if there's a 9 board of directors and the chairman, company chairman lead the board of directors, then if 9, the 5 should be from outside directors, and that is the practice of corporate governance practice. Then board independence need to be secured, and how we are going to determine whether these directors are independent. Independency can be determined from different the criteria and dimensions. Now these are some the criteria which can be used to determine whether the board of directors are independent or non-independent. Now, independence means that close family friends. Now, close family friends are not called as independent. The non-close family members mean director spouse, parents, children, grandparents, brothers, sisters, grandchildren, or any other person who is financially dependent on each other. They are not independent. And financially financially dependent individual, they depends on the members of the board, the inside directors or the executive directors. Any person who receive more than half of their support for the most recent financial years from the directors or his or her spouse. That is called, if the companies, they are getting the more than half of their support for the financial year from the directors and their spouses. This is called they are not independent. And business connections, relationship result in a transaction value equivalent to 10% of turnover of that company or business is called the non-independence. This is called non-independence. And significant shareholding, shareholders shareholders holding carrying not less than 10% of the voting right of the company that is called the non-independent directors. Then the board directors, the independence refers to the corporate uh, board that has majority of independent outside directors. So compared to inside dominated boards, that is inside dominated board and outside dominated board believed to be more vigilance in monitoring managerial behavior and decision making of the firms. Now, having an independent board alone may not be sufficient to guarantee good governance. So if you have the independent director boards, it doesn't mean that by having only the independent boards, the governance practice can be guaranteed. It is likely that independent board members might be brought into serve as token or window dressing in order to fulfill the minimum regular requirement. Sometimes what happens, then the companies, the organization, they appoints independent board of directors that is to save, that is fulfill the regulatory requirements or to show that the company has following the good governance practices to the outside, which is called the window dressings. And then because of that, having the independent directors only does not ensure the corporate governance practices of the organization. However, then different the mechanisms should be followed in appointing the independent board of directors, board members, and some mechanism has to be followed to maintain their independence with regard to the activities of the organization affairs. Now, these are the criticism of board of government anyway. The main arm that used to maintain the corporate governance of the organizations. Now, these are the criticisms of board of directors and include to readily approve managers' self-saving initiatives. Sometimes what happens, the board of director without going deeper, they approve the manager's self-saving behavior, which is the problems, which is a problem, and are exploited by the manager with personal ties to board of members. And sometimes they are the person, even though they initially independence, once they join there, then they maintain some personal relationships through which the independent will not be secured and are not vigilant enough to hiring and monitoring CEO behavior. The board of directors, they are not much concerned about hiring and monitoring the behavior of the CEO. Therefore, CEO can do many things which is not the interest of the shareholders, which is not maybe interest of the others, but the board of directors has a check and control mechanism. They will not much concern about those the behavior and lack of agreement about the number and most appropriate role of outside directors. And there's no kind of agreements with regard to how many board members is the best, how many board members are the best, and their appropriate roles as outside directors, which are lacking. And enhancing the board of directors all, and this is enhancing the effectiveness of board of directors. And these are suggestions: more diversity in background and background of board the members. Therefore, board members should be diverse in terms of their background, maybe education qualification, age-wise, gender-wise, and the professional-wise. They should be diverse. And strong internal management and accounting control system. There should be a good internal management and the controlling systems in the organizations. And the more formal process to evaluate the board's performance. There should be a process, good for process in the organization to evaluate the performance of the boards and adapting lead director, the organization, lead director in the boards. And even though you have the board members, from them select the lead director and change in the compensation of the director, then they will work, uh, expect them to get the more work. Now, these are the trends in the corporate governance, and board are more involved in reviewing and shaping strategy. Those are the trends. There are some issues happen previously with regard to the functioning of the organizations. And because if something happened in the organization, malpractices happen, the board members are individually and the collectively responsible for the issues happen in the organization. Therefore, board are more involved and reviewing the shape of the strategy. Because if some in Sri Lanka also you can see recently NDB Bank or some malpractices happens, and is such a case if something happens in the organizations and board members are totally the responsibles, totally responsible individually as well as collectively. Therefore, the trend is that boards are more involved in reviewing and the shaping the strategy. And then other thing trend is that institutional investors are more active in pressing for corporate governance in organizations. The individual investors are more active because now institutional investors mean that the large companies invest the money in those public companies. Then because of they invested the money, they have the expertise to check or check the activities of the organizations, and then that enhances the corporate governance rather individual investors. If the individual person invests, they are not much concerned about the way the organization is operating. But if the large the organizations, institution invest, they have the capacity, they have the capability, they have the expertise to see how the organization is functioning, and that is a trends of the countries with regard to the corporate governance. And shareholders demand that the directors and executives own more than token amount of stocks. Now, in order to become a shareholder of a company, one share is enough. But if those people less the less the people, those who have less shares, become a members to the board, and they are not much concerned about the money because they have the low investments, less investments. But if large investors are in the board, they are much concerned because if something happen, their money will be lost, and they are do their activities in a very the vigilance the manner. A number of non-affiliated outside directors are increasing in organization, and board are getting smaller. The larger boards are not much effective. There are many. Therefore, the small boards will be the trend today. Now, these are the criteria in selecting members of the board of directors. These are the rational criteria in selecting members of the board of directors. One is the willing to challenge management. The person should be able to challenge the management, something going wrong. And a special expertise should be there in the areas. If you have, for example, say tourism, the person has experience in tourism. Person is in airline, person should have experience in expertise in the area. And availability for advice and meeting. The person should have some time, free time, or to the meeting availability, and expertise on global issues should be there with the global issues, and understood by technologies. The person should have understand by that technologies, and external controls valuable to the firms. Then you have the external contract, the valuable to the firms, external contract, and detailed knowledge of industry, Person has a detailed knowledge about the industry and high visibility in the field. The person high visibility and the accomplishing representative firms shareholder. These are some of the factors should be taken into account in appointing or selecting the people for the members for the board of directors. Right? This is the board of directors, the governance parts. This is I summarize this one, and this is a small part of the governance. This is a wide area. Any question related to this one? Any questions?
Excuse me, sir, what are these percentages you given?
Percentage in the sense that now the willing to challenge management, that is in terms of the weightage or the ranking, the 90%, that is the number one. Number one, the challenge in management is the at least the people should have more capacity to the challenge the management. Now, for example, say accomplished the get the high visibility of the in the field. That is not much the required, but it is maybe not the like the challenges to management. These are kind of ranking and the weightage, right?
Okay, sir, got it.
Yeah. Anything? Now the second part is the corporate governance. Corporate governance. Before that, shall we have the 10 minutes break?